Hey guys, I'm Bobby Childs with Adventures in Whiskey. Today I have a special guest, Mr. Stephen Wilson from Crown Royal. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bob. Great to see you.
It's always good to see you.
And thank you for inviting me in your home so we can
anytime
we can talk about some good whiskey.
Anytime someone wants to come bring some whiskey to the house.
Yeah.
Come on.
That's really all it is. You
That's
just
all it is.
as long as you bring some bottles. Bobby's like,
bottles.
come on over. It's fine.
There's a sign outside. No entrance to that. Must carry this many bottles to come in.
I definitely always appreciate New Orleans hospitality, man. You always know how to make me feel very welcome. So thank you.
Yeah,
very much.
This was the third year I've bumped into you in New Orleans.
Yeah.
At Tales. It's Tales of the Cocktails time down here, and
Got the bracelet on.
I don't have mine yet, but I hate showering those things. They're just dangle all over the place.
Mine's just wet. It's either humidity or a shower. I don't know.
No, it's humidity. It's like a sauna. If you've never been in New Orleans in the summer, it's like a sauna outside. But we still love it because the food's totally worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to apologize. I got a little wrinkle in my shirt from the Uber, man. I just have to throw that out there. I'd like to be nice and pressed for you.
I'm bumming it out in a t-shirt.
It's no reflection on the liquid. The liquid's fantastic. So
Speaking of liquids,
Yes.
let's talk about Crown Royal in general. So how long have you been with Crown?
So I've worked on Diageo whiskey since 2006, but I've been fully dedicated to Crown for just over almost 3 years now. So
How often
2015.
How often do you make it up north?
I get up to the distillery as often as my schedule will allow. I do usually sometimes between December and March. I don't get up there as often because it gets a wee bit chilly
nippy
for me.
Yeah.
I've been up there when it's like negative 25, negative 30 in December, and that's cold. But you know what? That's part of the reason why Crown is so magical too, is because we get that big swing up in Gimli. But I love getting up there. We have such an incredible team at the distillery, and I've gotten to know so many of the men and women that work there. And same with our blenders. They're based outside of Montreal, and just being able to spend time with the folks who make our whiskeys day in and day out. It's awesome.
Sure.
And so for me, when I talk about these liquids and share them with a good friend and have good conversation, it's really about the folks who make it, kind of their stories and the work they put into it. So we got to get you up there at some point too. I know we've talked about that.
I won't say no.
Yeah, I know we've talked about that, so we got to make that happen.
Let's get into a little bit of tasting, and we can chat while we taste. So today we've got Crown Royal Deluxe.
You got the Deluxe.
Everyone loves Deluxe. Everyone knows Deluxe. And we have two new expressions, Blender's Mash and the new Noble Collection release of 13-year-old Blender's Mash.
13-year-old, right? And it's also the first time that we've really put an age statement on a bottle.
That's right, yeah.
So it's a pretty big deal for us to be able to do that. We talk about with XR, we obviously have some whiskeys dating back, from obviously in the Waterloo XR and then now the LaSalle XR. We have some whiskeys with some significant age on them. But for us to really say, we're going to focus on 13 being the youngest, and we'll talk about it when we get to it. We got some whiskeys in there older as well. Mark Bacanenda, our master blender, did such a fantastic job with this whiskey. The Deluxe is really what started it all. And
I'm going to pour while you're...
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people are familiar with Deluxe, but there are folks who, maybe they haven't had Deluxe in a while, or they are new to Canadian whiskey. And I always say it's nice to revisit an old friend, if you haven't visited it in a while. But the thing I love about Deluxe is, to me, it sets a great standard for what Crown Royal is, what a great Canadian whiskey is. When you look at it from a blending standpoint, the fact that we produce 5 individual styles of whiskey. Mm-hmm. We age those in a combination of brand new wood, previously seasoned wood, all been seasoned with Crown Royal, which is always a plus. And then, we let those sleep, we let them mature, we let them do their thing, and then our blenders take over, and not only do they create something really special, but they're able to maintain the consistency of a whiskey that dates back to 1939 for us, which is pretty awesome.
So it's I always found that process interesting compared to American whiskey, like a bourbon.
Right.
The mash bill's all set, they age, you blend barrels together, or batch barrels together, I guess. And there it is, where it's separate styles of whiskey that age, and the end product is sort of put together afterwards. The art of blending sort of happens.
Absolutely. And what's cool about Canadian whiskey too, I think, because Canadian whiskey, the parameters, I used to joke that we played a little loose up north, but it's not a joke. It's in a way it allows for a lot of creativity. So the way we produce our blend, it's different than how some of the other Canadian whiskey brands produce their blends. But then at the same time, there's folks in the Yukon territories making single malts. There's all these possibilities within the world of Canadian whiskey. And even for us to have separate mash bills is unique. A lot of times you'll see with Canadian whiskey, well, we'll just do a rye mash bill, we'll do a corn mash bill, but we actually create mash bills. We're thinking about flavor almost like we would if we were making an American whiskey, which is awesome. And then it's the blending is the fun part though, getting the right barrels, putting the right barrels, creating the right layers of flavor. So.
Yeah, I've always thought of blending as if distilling is the science part, blending is the art part.
Absolutely, and it's that beautiful combination that ends up in our glass.
So what I love about Crown is, and I don't like to use the word smooth, so I won't.
I'm the same way. I feel the same way about smooth. It gets used way too often in life.
What I like about a Crown is it's very easy drinking, and it's got some great vanilla and sort of caramel, maple flavors if you're looking for them, and it's just very pleasing. I've always liked it neat. I know a lot of people like to throw some ice in it. By all means, drink it like drink whiskey, however you want it. It's there to enjoy, or Coke or whatever they want to do. So it's a nice sort of all around whiskey. It suits many styles.
I think it's a super approachable whiskey. I find that even when folks are a little intimidated about the world of whiskey, which guys like us, we're around whiskey, we're lucky. But if someone's like, I kind of want to learn about whiskey, there's a lot to take in. And Crown, again, not only as a Canadian whiskey, but just as a whiskey, it's so approachable. And it has that creaminess, it has the oak, the vanilla, nice little bit of spiciness to it. You get the little floral notes, the grainy notes. And then it's lovely on its own. It's lovely with a little bit of ice, and it holds up in a cocktail, which is great.
Now, when we were talking about blending, that's nice. I haven't had this in a while. A good while, probably a good 4 or 5 months, and it's nice. It's nice. The finish is what always gets me, compared to a couple of Canadian whiskeys that I won't go into. I really enjoy the finish on Crown Royal Deluxe.
It's the mouthfeel. So one of the whiskeys we produce 2 corn whiskeys that really kind of form the base. Backbone, if you will, and one is it's what we call a batch-based whiskey, but we use 100% corn. We run that through a beer still, and then we do a second distillation in what we call a kettle column still, which is really exactly how it sounds. It's a kettle with a column on top, and it allows for us to get that second distillation, really capture kind of the heads, tails, that middle cut that we need, and it produces a spirit that is just beautiful, kind of like juicy fruit butterscotch. And it's got this creaminess to it. And that's what you're really tasting on that finish is that creaminess, that mouthfeel. It really coats the inside of the mouth. We always put that in previously, seasoned wood or used wood. And it's one of, if you're familiar with Entrapment, in fact, the Orphan Barrel series, that's what that was.
Okay.
So it was really cool for us to be able to share that with the Orphan Barrel series and to launch that because it's a whiskey that internally we always love, and we always love being able to pull samples of that because that really is kind of that, we talk about the hand-selected barrel, the coffee rye being that really magical ingredient that goes into Crown, but that batch-based whiskey is really what forms that mouthfeel for us. So.
And with the age, I don't remember specifically off the top of my head, the age that Entrapment had, I think it was 25, something like that.
Man, I should know. If anybody's watching this, I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
And it's only going to get longer.
It's only going to get longer.
I remember thinking, what a well-aged corn whiskey. And it's something I don't see on the market a lot.
No.
There are a couple of, there's Mellow Corn. It's I think a 4-year-old bottle and bond. And there may be a couple other American corn whiskeys on the market, but you don't really see just a corn whiskey with a nice age statement on it.
And we've really lucked out with that one too. When we look at the Orphan Barrel series, the Orphan Barrel series has been an incredible series, and you're familiar with the series in and of itself. For Crown to be part of that, and for it to be the first time that Orphan Barrel said, "Well, can we have a Canadian whiskey as part of that?" It was an honor for us to be part. But that's one that I can honestly say I've been in the warehouses when we only had a few barrels. And to have a base whiskey that had that much age on it, I remember opening that up with a few other whiskeys for some guests we had at the distillery, and everybody will go usually to the rye or the coffee rye. Everybody kept coming back, and wanted to go back to that. And it was really nice to see that. And it's just such a lovely whiskey and a great representation of the quality that we produce too, which is nice.
We were talking about blending earlier, and I thought this would be a great segue into blender's mash.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do me a favor, tell us the story of how sort of this came to be.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Don't mind at all. So when we think about the component whiskeys of Crown Royal, we talk about that batch base and we have a continuous base. So those are kind of, again, the building blocks. We're starting to blend with that. And then we're going to produce what we consider our flavoring components.
Sure.
So we produce the coffee rye that we talk about, which is available as a single barrel in the hand-selected barrel.
Which is fantastic, and Davin DeKergamo will tell you every time you see him.
That his bottle's the best.
His bottle's the best, yeah.
I always laugh because Davin's like, Steven, you have a bottle, right? And I'm like, Davin, I have one of yours that I've never opened, and I'm not going to open it. I keep that one to the side, but Davin, no, he loves the, and he'll be very quick. Doesn't matter where he is. You know, my barrel was the best. And I have to agree with his barrel was pretty darn good.
I can imagine.
It was a darn good barrel, but it's been cool to be able to share that whiskey. You know, that was a whiskey we rolled out originally in Texas, and then we were able to kind of share that with folks throughout the U.S. And it's been really cool because that's 100% of our coffee rye. So it's a 2/3 corn and 1/3 rye mash bill, a little bit of barley. We're utilizing the coffee still, and really unless something's changed, we're the only distillery in North America that has one. So for us to be able to produce that spirit, it's awesome. So that's one of the components. And then we produce a rye. So Northern Harvest Rye is a great example of that.
At a great value as well.
Great price point. It's super approachable. Like it really falls in a range where it's very affordable to a lot of folks. And I get that a lot. A lot of folks always say, "Oh, I like this because $30, whatever it is, it's approachable." And again, that's kind of the thing with Crown. We always want to produce a great whiskey that folks can enjoy. You know, you make whiskey to be shared with folks.
That's what it's for.
So that's 95% rye, 5% barley. That's the rye mash bill we use. Northern Harvest Rye is a blend, so we've got some other whiskeys kind of blended in to really create something unique. And then Blender's Mash, it focuses on kind of the third flavoring component, which is a 2/3 corn, 1/3 rye mash bill, a little bit of barley, same mash bill that we're using for the coffee rye. But that's the whiskey that's going to give us really the floral notes, the grainier notes. When we put that in the American Oak brand new cask, we get a lot of the vanilla, the caramel, we'll get maybe some of that coconut quality coming through. So for us with Blender's Mash, we thought, well, we have the coffee rye, we have the rye, can we now focus on that third component? And that way we really kind of give folks an idea of when you start to break down the Crown Royal blend, where we're tasting the different flavors, where the different aromas and different personalities are coming from.
And while I pour a little bit for both of us to try, that mash bill sounded very familiar. It sounded reminiscent of.
It does sound very familiar.
If American you know whiskey we all love.
If you know whiskey really well, if you know 2/3 corn, 1/3 rye, it definitely has a familiar ring to it for sure. Oh, that's yours. I'm taking yours.
There you go.
There we go. I'll trade you a glass. I'll see you a glass. And bring you a glass over. I'm gonna save my special glass here for the new one.
Is that the Lagavulin glass?
That's the Lagavulin glass.
glass.
Lagavulin was the first single malt I ever had.
Really?
Yeah. Now, would you start someone on Lagavulin? If somebody walked in and said, "I've never had a single malt," would you pour them Lagavulin?
No, but the first the first peated single malt I had was Lefroy 10.
Oh wow! All right.
I figured, and actually I had it with Mike, our cameraman Mike.
Right.
Is
Mike needs a whiskey, by the way.
I remember Mike does need some whiskey. That's the only reason he agreed to come here.
Yeah, Mike's like
to taste
on his
the whiskey.
knees, just kind of like, yeah, thanks guys. Yeah.
I was sitting at this table with Mike, and we popped open Lefroy and tried it, and I never looked back.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Lagavulin. You know, it's luckily in the years that I've worked on the Diageo whiskeys, I've had a lot of opportunity to do some really cool things with Lagavulin, and not as often as I'd like, but that's one of those whiskeys that I still think the person who poured it for me the first time, and I'm just like, you know what, that was my introduction to single malt Scotch. And man, what a great introduction. It's also my wife's favorite whiskey. She loves, on the single malt side, loves Lagavulin. So,
my wife, who's off camera on the other side of the room on a computer, is not a big
there's
whiskey
like 50
drinker.
people back here, by the way. Yeah.
Where's
Where's
wife?
Rocky? Where's the dog? Rocky's gone.
Oh, he's
over
passed
there. He's over there.
Her favorite is Johnny Walker Black. Her second favorite is Johnny Walker Blue. When it comes time to pour a single malt, usually whenever I get a sample, I get lots of samples. Thankfully, I get to taste so many incredible whiskeys with the blog. Whenever I pour something for the first time, I give her the first sip.
Oh, that's very kind.
Just to sort of get her reaction, knowing what she likes. And generally the first question she'll ask, if it's a single malt, is it peated? And if I say no, her face sort of drops. She likes the heavily peated stuff. She loves Lafroig. She loves Lagavulin. She loves... and Lagavulin to me is sort of a medium heavy peat. It's not this big punchy in your face. Lagavulin 16 is it's very rounded, beautiful.
Beautifully balanced. That's what it is.
But yeah, if it's not peated, she doesn't care.
It was interesting years ago, and not to get off the subject of Crown, I remember hosting a malts tasting, and it was a great group of folks, and we were tasting through Dalwhinnie, and I think we had Glenkenchie, and we had Cragganmore.
Two, I haven't. The three actually of just the classic malt series
you have?
that I haven't tried.
Well, we have to.
Release.
We'll have to. You know Ewan Morgan, right?
I think I've said hi once or twice.
Maybe we can get you, and if we'll get him to lead you through a tasting, or I can do it. At some point, we can ask Crown for permission. Can I jump over just for?
I'm sure
just for a few minutes and talk some single malts. But I just remember we had such a great selection, but all of the women, and it was a good 50-50 mix. They kept coming back to Talisker and Lagavulin, and it was really cool. I loved seeing that, and it was interesting because like the men were really kind of going more toward the Dalwhinnies and the Glenkenchies, and the women just kept saying, "What's this? I want to know more about this." So there's something. My wife's the same way. She definitely she likes Black Label. She likes Lagavulin. She also loves Crown Royal too. So again, when you're a whiskey drinker, you find that little whiskey in every category.
You know what you like, and a lot of people stick to it. But I always say, venture out.
Oh, absolutely.
Be adventurous. I mean, Adventures in Whiskey is the name of the blog. Try something new. You never know what you'll find.
Kind of set that up for you there, didn't we? I didn't even. Now you've had the Blender's Mash, right?
I've had the Blender's Mash.
But you haven't had the 13.
I haven't had the 13-year-old. I've been holding off for tonight.
That's a true gentleman, by the way. He's had a bottle, but he waited.
Oh, that's nice.
The nice thing about this, so we have two master blenders that really focus on the Crown portfolio, and there's other blenders as well, but Joanna Scandella and Mark Balcanenda are two main master blenders. And Mark really looks after kind of our reserve brands. Mm-hmm. Joanna's focus is deluxe, and that's an all-consuming focus when you think about just the sheer volume.
Yeah.
And they both always say, Joanna says, look, I'm the steward. I'm carrying on the tradition of the blenders before me. And Mark says the same thing, and they're just so humble, and they're such lovely, lovely people. He did such a wonderful job with this because he took that mash bill in both new wood and previously used wood. So we have some new wood and old wood influence, various ages, and he was really able to create a nice representation of a whiskey that would then get blended into, say, a Crown Royal Deluxe, which I like.
Which is nice because it sort of keeps a bourbon-like quality without being oaky.
Mm-hmm.
And that can have something to do with temperature swings, the used casks that are being utilized. But it's if you like bourbon and you've never gone to Crown, this would be a great sort of entry.
Absolutely,
it's a great gap to try things like Deluxe or Crown Royal Black or Reserve or any of the other fantastic expressions.
Yeah, because especially if you're a bourbon drinker, and I always, I grew up on the Tennessee-Virginia border. I've always been a huge bourbon guy, huge Tennessee whiskey guy. And if you just start thinking about grange, thinking about distillation techniques, you start looking at that, then you're like, okay, well, I like this particular mash bill. This is if we made this in the U.S., it'd be a high rye bourbon mash bill, right? So you think about that. And then when you look at the history of Seagrams, you look at the history of Crown Royal, there's a lot of history that ties in. But that's what's been nice is over the last few months is when you have folks who are those diehard bourbon drinkers. And they get excited about this, especially when they start to put two and two together with the mash bill. And it's always nice when you have someone and say, you know what, I really like that. That's a really nice whiskey. That's making me take a second look at Canadian whiskey, making me take a second look at Crown Royal. It's always nice to hear that.
Well, I think about this long finish that the whiskey's providing. Mm-hmm. Can I ask you about the thing?
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
So
I'm an open book. I mean, really.
When Blender's Mash first came out, it had a different name, and I got a bottle down here.
And you have
I've got the bottle.
the museum piece.
It was called Bourbon Mash. Do you want to explain sort of what happened, why the name changed?
Yeah, I mean, so internally, we've always just kind of referred to it as our bourbon mash bill or our Canadian bourbon, however you want to look at it. And it's more when you look at our blending team is really part of kind of our North American blending team, right, for Diageo. So it's just a way of communicating internally.
Sure.
But we've always thought that, and we've also always, we're all whiskey lovers first. So we've certainly always thought of ourselves as, paying homage to all these great whiskeys that are out there. So the idea was to say, this is the mash bill that we've always created. It's always been part of Crown dating back to 1939 when Crown Royal Deluxe, and before that, really, when you get into the history. And that's what we call it. So we're, bourbon mash. And so, Diageo does things by the book. So T's, were crossed, the I's were dotted, everything was approved, the label was approved, packaging, and, it got launched. And then there was some conversation that took place. I wasn't part of.
Sure.
We have legal teams that have those conversations. I get to talk about the whiskey and enjoy it. And the agreement was reached to change the name. And the agreement, we went with Blender's Mash. And part of that is we were really looking at creating what we were going to call a blenders series, which was going to focus our rye and focus some of the component whiskeys. So the timing worked out well, and we made the choice. And, now we have the new packaging. You have an old bottle, which is nice. But the focus is, no matter what the name, as I always tell everybody, for me, the focus has always been on the liquid. I was tasting and sampling the liquid with Mark, our master blender, long before it was in a bottle and long before we had an official name on it. And it's always been about that. So even though the name changed, liquid stayed the same. And it makes for, guys like us can have a fun conversation about it. And,
Right.
It is what it is. It's a nice little talking point. And one day you'll be like, oh, I have an old bottle of that bourbon mash.
If it hasn't been opened up.
If it hasn't been opened up, right, yeah.
You mentioned age statements. You didn't mention age statements. You mentioned what's inside the bottle is sort of what counts. And I like to say that to sort of naysayers of non-age statement whiskeys.
Yeah.
Or no age statement, the whiskey inside is trash. No, try the whiskey. They're fantastic. Age is just a number.
It is.
And so I don't want to make that part seem negative when we switch over to our next release. Because for me, age statement is just sort of an expectation of what you can expect in the bottle.
Yeah.
And if there's no age, hey, it's free reign.
It's always been fun. I mean, I think especially, when I had the opportunity to work on the Scotch whiskey side of the business, when you would see folks discover a whiskey that didn't have an age statement, and all of a sudden say, oh, well, or I think Ewan, we were talking about Ewan a minute ago, but he was always really good about doing, does age really matter type seminars. And it was always great to see the whiskeys folks would choose as their favorite.
When you taste them blind,
when you taste them blind and you can't see the bottle and you have no preconceived ideas,
the liquid
it's about the flavor.
Sure.
I know Jim Beveridge, the master blender for Johnny Walker. I remember sitting with him years ago, and I left with such an appreciation for Johnny Walker Red Label, because he's such a huge Red Label fan. But when you start looking at the whiskeys he chooses to create that blend that doesn't have an age statement, and then when you look at the popularity of it around the world, it really is fantastic. And Crown's that way. We've never focused on an age statement. As I mentioned with XR, we obviously can trace that back.
Sure.
But it's always been about the blend. It's been about creating that personality or that consistency, especially. So with this, it was something new.
Sort of a treat to
Put
something new out.
Absolutely. And we want to talk about the whole Noble series, right? We want to kind of
let's
back
let's
up.
go,
We want
because
to
this
taste
is number.
first.
Let's pour and
Okay.
taste.
How about I pour for you?
Oh, what a
Let
gentleman.
me show you some hospitality. I'll show you a little Canadian hospitality.
Guy comes to pour whiskey in my own house. I won't argue.
Well, they produce Crown in Manitoba, and Manitoba's slogan is Friendly Manitoba. So even though I'm not from Manitoba, I still try to embody that, at least when I'm with you.
What a gentleman. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome, and I didn't spill any on the nice table.
Oh, that's nice.
So, going back to our master blender, Mark Buchanan, with the 13-year-old Blender's Mash, all new wood, So it's that same mash bill, 2/3 corn, 1/3 rye, a little bit of barley, all brand new wood though. So we're not using any previously used, no previously seasoned wood in this. Youngest whiskey is going to be 13 years, but there will be some whiskeys a little bit older than that, because really Mark had some fantastic whiskeys to choose from. He really did a nice job at selecting just the right ones to create something. If you look at Crown Royal Reserve, which is my go-to Crown Royal, absolutely love Reserve. This is a great representation of the whiskeys that would be chosen for a Crown Royal Reserve.
Okay.
Because Reserve is going to have some older, I always say it's the top 1 or 2% of what we have available to us, because when we start looking at age and flavor profile. So this is a really great representation of that. So it was really nice to be able to see us launch that and showcase that on its own. And again, just coming back to the quality of whiskey we produce. We produce great blends, but we also have these other fantastic whiskeys that make up those blends, and being able to kind of break those out, and showcase them. It's really nice to be able to do that.
And I believe this is bottled at 90 proof.
It's at 90.
Yeah. Which is nice, because some of my bourbon friends don't want to try Crown because it's 80 proof.
Because it's 80. 90's become like that new standard, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't,
90's the new 80.
Yeah.
And I know some folks are dedicated barrel proof people. If it's not barrel proof, we don't touch it. It's a bad attitude to have. You should really just, again, open your palate and open your imagination and try something new. That smells delicious.
The nose on it's fantastic. And again, all new wood. So you're just getting beautiful floral notes, green. It's the first time, and you're having it for the first time.
This
so
is the first time.
I'm going to sit back, let you evaluate it.
There's a lot of where it's a bit darker than say something like flavor aromas I find here. So the caramels are a little bit darker. There's a bit more spice. There's an ever-present oak, but it's by no means oaky. But yeah, some of those top notes there's a little bit of floral. Some of those baking spices just coming out there, jumping out of the glass, some cardamom, maybe a little nutmeg. Oh, this is fantastic.
It's funny. I'll find, depending on where I taste it and depending on what I've kind of been doing throughout the day, which obviously is going to change our palate, it'll change our perception of smell anyway. But it's like tonight, you're right. There's a lot of baking spice. You're getting a lot of that nutmeg coming through. The last event I did for this, we were outside in Manhattan, and there was a different set of aromas in the air, and now we have a nice neutral environment here, so we're really picking up some really lovely notes.
You're right. Some of those grains, like some toasted grains. Let's give it a taste.
Give it a taste.
Cheers. That's very nice. It's rich. It's a bit creamy, a lot creamier than Blender's Mash. It's almost like everything's turned up to 10 comparatively. Those spices on the nose are present there in bulk. I borderline call it a spicy whiskey.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think
but not
it's got a high rye content. So
the high rye content, which is coming along as sort of like a buttered rye toast, piece of rye toast. Again, some of the creaminess and some of the spice. A lot of baking spices, and there's a nice sort of like, if I had like a whole grain waffle and I poured a little bit of maple syrup on it, a little bit of that too, and then on the back part of the palate, there's a little bit of oak to add a little bit of bitterness and astringency, a little dark chocolate. It's nice. The finish is nice and warm too. Another Diageo product that's recent, the George Dickel Tabasco.
The Tabasco, yeah.
Don't think anything like that.
No.
It's just nice and sort of warming, and it's like a nice hug.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like a warm hug.
Yeah.
It's a warm hug from Gimli.
Yeah. Which the temperatures of 20 degrees below zero, you need one.
Sometimes you do.
Stephen, all right, before we wrap up, so this is release number 3 in the Noble collection. Tell us about 1 and 2.
So the first year we launched, so Noble will be a series, which we're excited about because, again, we always think of ourselves, we're whiskey lovers first, right?
Sure.
We're lucky we get to work with these incredible whiskeys day in and day out, and we get to share them with folks. So we kind of started planning out, well, what does the Noble series look like? So the very first one we launched was our Cornerstone blend. And Cornerstone was essentially a blend of our flavoring whiskey. So it was that rye, the coffee rye, what we're calling our blender's mash. It was those 3 whiskeys blended together. The cool thing about that is that forms, that's like the part of the DNA of obviously Crown Royal.
Sure.
It's the flavoring components. But the cool thing about that was how it kind of got blended together, and then it wasn't. There was just a lovely story that went with it. So it really created something that would be hard for us to replicate. So that's what launched the series, and that was a fantastic way to start it. And then last year we did our wine barrel finish. And with that, we started looking at wood and different influences. And we took Crown Deluxe and we put it in Cabernet barrels for 6 months. And we ended up with this, juicy, beautiful fruit coming through. To me, it was like a Manhattan in a glass. I mean, it just had such a lovely, lovely aroma and flavor to it. And then we followed that up this year with our 13-year-old blender's mash. So every year, and our goal is usually somewhere in the April, May, June area.
Spring release, which is
spring release, is when we're going to always see it. So, I know some things that are coming. I'm excited about those, but I'm more excited once I see them come to fruition, because then we get to share them with everybody and we get to talk about them.
And I'm so glad you get to share them with everyone, because
That's good.
This is
good whiskey is meant to
fantastic.
be shared.
Well, that's what it's for.
Yeah.
Bottles are meant to be opened, not stared at.
I don't believe in whiskey museums. It's about good conversation and good people and having good whiskey.
And if Stephen asks nicely, I might open something new in the whiskey room tonight. We'll see.
I'm feeling pretty nice today too, so we'll see.
Well, Stephen, I'm truly honored that you're able to stop by, make time to come by, and share some incredible whiskey. Thank you so much.
Bobby, it was an absolute pleasure. Anytime I'm down here, anytime we can get together and just share a good conversation and good whiskey, it's always a pleasure. So thank you for having me stop by. It's a little late, so I appreciate your flexibility on that as well.
Anytime.
It's like 2 a.m, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's not that late.
It's a school night. Bobby's got to go to work tomorrow.
It's a school night. But cheers to you.
Cheers.
Great to see you.
Cheers to you.